All right, here we go. I am super excited for this one. I'm here with fellow podcasting friends, Chelsie and Diana, you guys from the Routine podcast. How are you guys doing?
Doing great.
Good.
How are you?
I'm doing great. It actually just popped into my head. This successfully completes, to my knowledge, most of the gymnastics podcasting circuit. We had Jessica from Gymnastics on, we had Sam from her podcast on, and then now we have you guys. So we're like we're like the quad going on in the gymnastics.
Yeah, exactly. We should just keep going around in the quad, right?
We're all in this together.
It's free content, right? We'll just, guys, I got nothing. Who can we interview? Let's just go.
It's funny. I'm speaking of which, are we recording this, Chelsea? Because we were thinking we might use some of this for our podcast.
We should, actually.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I absolutely was gonna email you guys. I want to repost the one from your guys to mine so we can cross audience and get more people towards your podcast.
That's a great idea.
That sounds good. This is like you said, we're all in this together. And when we have no other content, we have each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And so I do a lot of that too. I'll like repost old lectures because Becky, my digital media girl, she's amazing, but she's got a job too. She coaches in Australia and like, I got to like find content to film. Like, well, Q&A this week, like put it on Instagram, a bunch of questions, like repost a lecture. It's hard to get content out every week.
Yeah, you know what we're going to do, at least we think at some point, because we've had such a good summer series, right, including yourself, that we're going to like do highlights, best sound bites.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so there's no question you'll be on that with some of your sound bites.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, if people haven't caught on to my methods now, I do video and I do audio, and then I splinter them down into about 50 smaller pieces of content that go like quote, video, articles, email, blog. And so people always ask me, they think I have like a doppelganger or like a staff, and it's just using content really well.
Yeah, I think the best sound bite that we have from you this year, not last year, but this year, was the whole house on fire thing, right? Do you remember the smoke alarm?
Yeah. I forget.
So,
but basically, everything's just up in flames, and we're not doing anything about it.
Yeah, so that actually came from, we did a course at Harvard this year for the first time for a lot of gymnastics medical providers, and it was like a legendary room, and there was a lot of big NCAA trainers and really important people on the medical side. And I don't know, it was the first time I was really able to be candid and honest, and I just said that. I was like, guys, I feel like we're standing in front of a burning building, and everyone's asking if we have new smoke alarm batteries. Like, we're totally missing some huge problems in gymnastics because, and we said this on your podcast, it's like the harsh reality is like no one's okay having an uncomfortable conversation, and no one's okay maybe putting themselves in the mirror and taking more accountability for their own actions, and myself included 1,000% for the last few years of coaching. But until we have uncomfortable conversations and hold ourselves accountable, and Tom Farden said it really well on the podcast. He said, before you point the finger, pull the thumb. I was like, oh, that's right.
That's so true. Well, it's funny too, because on our podcast, we really try to look at everything in a positive light, right? And when we talk about our experiences, there are parts of it that are painful for us to relive.
Absolutely.
Right? And we always talk about when Chelsie has children one day, would she put them in gymnastics? And the answer would be,
I don't know. I can't answer that, but it's more towards no than yes at this moment. So
I would agree. I think I don't know is the best answer. I think that I want my son or daughter to have an experience in gymnastics, but if they ever start to get pulled towards the competitive route, and like if the gym that we're a part of just has like a really hardcore competitive team, I would be almost in the way, unless they were dying to do it. But I don't know at this point, until something changes. I feel very strongly that I don't know if I could safely do that and feel good about it as a parent.
Yeah. And as a parent who did it, I wouldn't do it again.
Really?
I would not do it again. Nope.
Do you have any other siblings? Chelsea, do you have brothers or sisters that were in gymnastics?
No. Well, I have an older brother, but he never did gymnastics. He just did basketball.
Yes. Very different children. My son thinks he's good at everything and probably really isn't. But I love him.
Let's hope he's not listening to the podcast.
From a sports perspective, like he was the one that would, play basketball and just do the whole movement thing when he, as if he would swish, but it didn't.
like fake juking people, like, got him.
Exactly.
Confidence through the roof.
Yeah. You know, he would play baseball and slide, even though he didn't need to. You know, that's fun, right? And Chelsie was the really true athlete, but didn't have the confidence.
Yeah.
So very different children, and I really, as a parent, wonder, did gymnastics help or hurt Chelsie in that respect?
Yeah.
So it's just, and I'm not one of those people who really rethink that I should have done things differently.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not
Right.
one of those people, right? It's I did what I did with the best knowledge I knew at the time, and that's how I live. But when it comes to Chelsie and gymnastics, that's one I really do think, was that the right decision?
Yeah. And this is kind of why I wanted you guys on the podcast. Cause I mean, one of the things I like about my podcast is I'm just lucky to have a lot of different perspectives of people, from gymnasts to athletes to medical providers to, expert medical people who just treat gymnasts but aren't involved in the sport. And I kind of want to frame this up with kind of giving my experiences from the parent and daughter point of view, working, in a clinic where there's a lot of parents and a lot of kids who come to my clinic champion for stuff. And then I want to give you guys the floor to kind of tell your story, and then maybe just hear about your experiences and what you would do differently, or what you thought from the athlete and from the parent point of view is things that other young athletes or parents of young athletes can learn from. So from my point of view, so I treat probably 20 to 30 gymnasts a week, and they come with their parents. And, I'm fortunate now that I get a lot of really high level athletes that come far away and they want to get an opinion because they've had a really tough time of like 2 or 3 years of injuries and just breakdown in medical. And it's really, really hard for me to have a conversation about, why gymnastics is so hard, why they've had 3 surgeries by the age of 14 or 15, why they have a broken back when they're 12, why are the coaches pushing so hard getting to college. And I don't want to blame the coaches and say that it is there, because there's a lot of really good coaches who do exactly the right thing. They email me, they text me, they want to know what's going on, they want to help the kid. But unfortunately, the common pattern now is a lot of parents coming into the office with just so much regret. I want to say it's just why did I allow this to happen? Why did I let the coaches just do whatever they want and push them down in splits and go crazy training hours and push through injuries? And why is this okay? And now they're a lot of kids are getting pulled out of gymnastics because they have injuries, and their mom's like, this isn't safe. The dad is like, I can't live with myself putting my daughter or son back in gymnastics after all these injuries. And it's really sad, because the kids love gymnastics. And if they just had a way to get over injuries, or it wasn't such a harsh training environment where there's so much of a dictatorship mentality, especially at the higher levels, the kids could get much more out of it. And I feel a lot of it stems from a lack of communication about goals between the parents, the coaches, and the athletes. And so that's my 2 cents. And I'm not a parent. I don't have young kids in gymnastics. And I obviously work with the parents at my gym, but I don't know your guys' perspective. So I'd like to hear what you guys went through, and then also kind of hear, some big speed bumps that you guys had along the way.
Sure. So you start or I start?
I think you can start from the parent perspective.
Okay, sure. So Chelsie was probably 5 when we took her to a birthday party at the gym. And the birthday girl at the gym got to be in a harness where they, swing the harness back and forth, right? Yep. And she loved it, absolutely loved it. And that's when we said, oh, why don't we start her in gymnastics? And Chelsea's a really amazing athlete. Any sport she does, Chelsea's great at. She gets it from her mom.
Yeah, I knew it. I felt it. Small flex right there.
And of course, as an athlete in my side, right, that I'm very competitive. So when Chelsie got into the sport, it's she's going to be good at this. We're going to, do everything we can that she can be good. We want her on team. You're watching the older girls do all these great things, and you're like, this is what I want for her. This is what I want, right? And that's how that painful journey started, quite frankly.
Yeah. And not to kind of butt in your story, but do you feel at a younger age when she was picked up as really talented that the coaches are pushing her, you were kind of living through her a little bit? You're like, oh, this is she's going to do so great. This is her moment. And I don't want to put words in your mouth. Was that a part of it though?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And she was just, things came really easy to her physically, definitely not mentally. Can you hear the dog bark, by the way?
I love it. It's good background noise. It's ambiance.
Sorry.
And we talk about our puppies on our podcast all the time, right? So they're actually hearing at least one of them now.
Okay. Sam has a FaceTimed in the middle of the last one by Bridget, so that one went over pretty well. It was hilarious. We're pretty laid back here. Keep going, sorry.
But no, so yeah, so she would, things came really easy physically for Chelsie,
Gotcha.
but mentally not by any stretch. And
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. I can't think of a day that she went to gymnastics without crying. Would that
Wow.
be true?
Yeah, I mean, earlier when I was a lot younger, I don't remember as much. But I think on my part, it was a lot more voluntary. Obviously, I wanted to go to practice every day, but as I kept getting better and it got more competitive, it got harder and harder for me to go.
Yeah.
To practice.
And were your mental struggles more like fear related? Was it like pressure from your coaches? Was it just like you were just a little bit of a nervous Nelly when you were younger? What was it?
I was just generally anxious, just
Yeah.
every day. And I think the pressure that I felt from my parents.
Me, it's what she means.
No judgment here. We're airing it out. We've all made mistakes, me included.
But I think also I felt very intimidated in my environment in the gym every day.
Gotcha.
So it just wasn't very welcoming for my personality type. And I think a lot of people thrive in that like pressure driven situation, but for me, I'm the complete opposite.
Yeah. And then Diana, I want to keep digging in a little bit because I think there's really important context here for everybody. So when you were thinking more about pushing her, was it because you just wanted her to reach her potential? Was it more because what I see personally, and this is a huge error I had of my own, is a lot of coaches and parents and gymnasts are kind of so worried about the judgment of other people and what other people think of them and their skill level and how fast they're moving and what they're doing at meets. Especially with social media right now, it is like just a absolute wildfire with how much people are so concerned with other people and fear of others' judgment. I see a lot of parents who are like looking at other gyms and looking at other parents or daughters or sons, and they need their daughter to keep up and they feel that pressure. And so I think that's a big root cause of that between the parents living vicariously through or the coach. I used to live directly vicariously through my athletes. And I was so worried at competitions about what other coaches thought of me because they weren't flipping their Sukes yet, or they weren't doing double backs yet, or they weren't doing advanced flight series. And I was so paranoid. And that was a huge reason why I pushed the kids so hard. And I made a massive mistake, like literally directly causing injuries or burnout or people quitting because my ego was so big. I was worried about what they thought of me. So was that similar for you? Or was it just, I want my daughter to do the best she can?
It was more that. I definitely didn't live vicariously through Chelsie, but I just knew that she could be great one day, right? It was more that, right? The same way with my son and academics. I knew that he could go to college and be something one day, right? It was this just way too much focus on the child. And I definitely was one of those parents, right? So when you get into the gym, and the parents were sitting there watching through that little bitty window, and all these girls are doing flips and the older girls are doing their thing and people are getting scholarships. And then I've got a daughter who's like amazingly talented. And the other thing that was really confusing for me is that Chelsie was happiest after gym.
Right. Yeah, that's a very good point.
Right after gym, I did this and I could do that, and this is what's going to happen. And so then I would get confused, right? Because she was always fearful going, and it definitely was fear. But afterwards, she had the best time in gym today.
Yeah. And this is the other side of the. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So it was always confusing for me. So is she doing it because she likes it or she hate it? I mean, so it was always, and I've always said this. Being a parent is so hard because there's no manual or book about it.
Yeah, no guide.
And so you didn't know, right? And then what got worse, as Chelsie talked about, the more she, went up from 5 to 6 to 7 to 8, that you now had all this history behind you of success. So
and how old were you?
Walking away from it was even harder at that point.
Yeah. How old were you when you were up to that little 7, 8 spurt, Chelsie?
Yeah, I can't remember. She was a level 9.
This is another important conversation.
Yeah. So
I was a level 9 in 8th grade. So right before I went into high school, I was a level 9.
Okay.
And then I kind of stayed 9, 10, all the way until I graduated.
Gotcha. And yeah, and I want to go back to an important point because I think people are easy to jump on the negative side of coaches and parents where like these awful people that are pushing young kids super hard. Honestly, there's a lot of times when it's not too. It's like the kid loves gymnastics. They want to be there. It's their community. It's their friends. They love training. They love being there. And I think the coaches are just trying to make sure, and the parents are trying to make sure that they're like doing the best they can to help the athletes reach their potential. And I don't think it's malicious all the time. And I think it's a very important point with the negative coverage that gymnastics has. Everyone is looking at gymnastics as like us as coaches and parents are like these horrible humans that just like push our kids. And it's like, you know, insane. Really not it. Like a lot of young kids love gymnastics and their friends are there and they want to be there. And it's honestly like as a coach and a parent, if you really are good natured and good morals and you want to do the right thing, it's almost about protecting the athletes from themselves when they're really, really young and so fired up.
Right. Chelsie wasn't that.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing.
And I think what also, you know, like you just said, we're getting that judgment from, you know, in my case, my family. Like, why are you? And because my family, we are obviously not a group who does gymnastics. My brother says if they don't have a ball, it's not a sport, you know. So they're, you know, we're getting pressure there too. And in my case, I put Chelsie in like every other sport possible to get her out of gymnastics, right? Or I don't think it was that. It was to confirm that this was the sport she wanted to do.
Right.
So she did tennis, she did baseball, she did basketball because again she was tall. And kid you not, and all of those places she was doing cartwheels and round-offs wherever she was.
I can just picture you in the stands like, all right, this is the one. She's going to do baseball. Ah, dang it. She's doing get the ball. Like, oh, back at the gym.
And again, it being the kind of parent that I was, I would get her own pro coach in tennis, right? Yeah. So that, and I do it because I wanted her to be good, but I had to balance her gymnastics time. And so I had to have a special time when she could do tennis. And I remember the pro that I had her with for tennis, because again, Chelsie was really good at that too. They told me, you're wasting your money. You know, yes, she's good, but she doesn't want to be here. So why are you, you know, and I figured, well, for a pro who's making money to tell me I'm wasting money to give it to him, that, yeah. So that way, it was very, very complicated.
Yeah, I can see that. And I kind of want to pause on this little section of the story because I think there's one more important thing here is that, do you think that, so there's a big argument right now, I'll frame this with some research. There's a big argument right now that the training hours for young gymnasts is concerning. It's too many, but we know that you have to have a certain amount of hours to train to get high level. And now more people are saying it's not so much that it's one sport for too much, but a lot of younger kids are doing like a lot of sports and it's taking up all their time. Like they go from baseball to gymnastics to this and back and then school and after school activities. And the kids literally have no rest time at all. So I think it's either one sport so much or a bunch of sports and you're carting them around going to all these lessons and stuff like that. Was that your guys' case at all? Did you feel like that had a negative effect on her when she was younger?
What do you think?
Sorry, that was a tough question to deliver.
I've actually never thought about that. I don't think the hours had a negative effect on me. I think it was more of just, this is how it is. If you want to be a gymnast, it's a full-time thing. It's year-round
commitment.
Right. And I just went into it knowing, okay, if I'm a gymnast, that's all I'm going to be.
Because that's all you knew. That's all we knew.
Yeah.
And the coaches were definitely not forgiving about time off. You felt guilty when you took a family vacation.
Right.
You know?
And this is the reason I'm saying it is because I think in our generation of coaching and stuff like that, me as well, like my coach was a good dude, don't get me wrong, but I was kind of brainwashed too to be like, you're here all the time, don't miss practice and skip family vacations, stuff like that. And the reason I'm asking this now is because you guys have definitely presented that, like looking back, there's some stuff that you really don't know if it was good or not. And I'm curious if this is like a huge problem that all of us are blindly still walking into is like full year-round training, hours all the time, no vacations, no time off. Like there's a difference between commitment to your sport and overtraining almost in a blind brainwashing way where you're like just doing it because you think it's a gymnast. I think there might be a better way to get to high level without what we're all talking about. Because I went through that too, but you guys did. And clearly there's a lot of injuries coming later in the story, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's just the whole experience. You know, the thing that's great about our podcast is that for once, Chelsie and I can enjoy the sport.
Yep.
And, you know, over all these years that we did this, it was no doubt a love-hate relationship, and not a lot of love and a lot of hate.
Yeah. Yep.
And so I think why we enjoy the podcast so much for us is that we are able to take this little thing that occupied our lives and now enjoy it in a totally different way than we ever got the chance to enjoy it when she was in it. Would you agree?
Totally. And to go back to the point of kind of being beholden to the gym, I almost kind of see that in my personal life today, like 5 years removed of gymnastics. Like even at work, I have all of these sick days, I have all of these vacation days, but I almost feel obligated not to take those days because it's been instilled in me that if you say you're going to be somewhere, you be somewhere. So I don't know if that's a positive thing or a negative thing, but that definitely has affected my life today.
Yeah, there's a double-edged sword here too, because I'm the exact same way, right? So like in my gymnastics life, I lived at the gym, I coached the gym, I was always there, and it turned into me with school and my own stuff. I just took no time off. I always was pushing as hard as I can, and I have learned the hard way that personality that bred me to be hardworking was really, really good, but it started to bleed into being toxic for me when I was the first 2 years of shift. I worked like 80 hours a week. I worked 12 to 15 hours a day for 2 years straight. And I definitely burned myself out hard, and I got in some really big hot water because I just had that mentality from gymnastics that it's like always go fifth gear all the time, no matter what, and stop complaining about it. Just keep working hard. It's like, be quiet and keep working. And it's like, it's a good caveat to have, but no human is going to survive with all work and no recovery.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was also thinking, you know, because you're making us relive this story again.
Pulling out the details. I like it.
That, you know, I think for me, I can divide up Chelsea's gymnastics career from obviously when she was like 5 years old to when she became probably a level 8, or maybe even a 7 or 8, to when she became an 8, to what happened afterwards.
Okay.
And I was a different parent in those two sections.
I was thinking that too. When you were talking, Mom makes it sound like she was like the big bad wolf.
I was in the beginning.
In the beginning, yeah, she had a lot of bad habits, but
that was a nice way to say it.
But I think as we both saw life as just like this bigger thing, I think we both kind of relaxed.
Yeah, we did. And you know what happened? You got hurt. We had surgery.
And what was the catalyst there?
Yeah, she got, what was the first surgery? Because she's had a couple.
The first.
How old were you?
I was.
You know when it was, Chelsie? I'm going to let her say this in a minute. I'm sorry.
She likes to do this. She likes to cut me off mid-sentence. This is how we work.
It was level 7 states were the next night. And we live 15 minutes from the gym. And it was like, I don't know, a half hour left in the, you know, before practice ended, night before states, level 7. And Chelsie was doing a souk on vault. And I got the call from the coach that said, I think you better come to the gym tonight. Chelsea's been hurt. And I drove like a crazy woman. And of course, Chelsea's crying. And they tell me I need to take her to the hospital tonight. And at that point, it's probably 9:00 at night. And I'm talking to her coach about what happened. And he's like, Chelsie did the souk and she put her hands down. And that's when she broke something. We believe
my knuckle.
Yeah, broke her knuckle. And this is what I said. And I'm laughing now at myself. I said, why did she put her hands down? And he said, so she wouldn't hit her face.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
And then I said, do you think she can still compete at states tomorrow?
Ooh.
Right?
Yeah. We've all been there. We've all been there.
And then I heard myself say that, and I thought, what the hell, Diana, right?
Yeah.
And that was the change for me.
Yeah. And Chelsie, what was the context around that? Was that just a fluke accident, or was that like something that you quite weren't ready for?
I was never really good at suits. And we were going on to hard landings because we were preparing for states the next day.
Yeah.
And I guess something just didn't go right. And then I just put my hand directly down, and then I just broke and dislocated my knuckle. And that was my first major injury, which looking back, it wasn't even that major compared to the other injuries that I had.
And so the next day at states, I cried the whole meet.
Really?
I wasn't competing.
Because she wasn't competing.
Was that crying out of like the, oh my God, why did I say that last night moment? Or was that like out of like, my daughter should be competing?
Yes, that was that. That's
Oh my.
I told you, Dave.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying, oh my God, because I've had the same thing on a coaching side. It's a surprise that we've had similar stories. I'm not judging you at all. It's because I've had the same
Judge
thing.
me though.
No, listen, because I had a girl who was doing a Yurchenko, and she wasn't quite ready. And I bumped her on a whole bunch that she like should have not done at all. And then I told her to do it because we had a meet the next day, and she broke her foot. And the next day at the meet, I was like, I can't believe she's not competing, out of like me being a jerk, not out of that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I know what you're going through. And it's more shock than judgment. Believe me.
Yeah. But it's, it's nuts. Yeah.
And I had the same exact thing. I was like a year later, I was like, what are you doing? This was through my ego realization moment.
But I also think it's also you're in this environment. What's that Patty Hearst thing that,
I'm not familiar.
There's a syndrome that happens when you're like in the moment, like you're in it, and your brain like completely shuts down, and and I can't remember the name. I'll look it up afterwards, because of course that's what my brain does too. But you're so in it that you're just not cognizant of normal anymore. Yep. And people can't talk to you. Like my husband couldn't talk to me. My parents couldn't talk to me. I remember calling my mom crying. She's like, what is wrong with you? Chelsie can't compete, and it's just nuts. Yeah. And you'll have to correct me, Chelsie. I think you were relieved that you didn't have to compete.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate piece of the puzzle that I think also does not get talked about, is that there are these fluke injuries that happen. But I've worked with a few really high level athletes, gymnastics and non, that like it's an accident. They don't want to be hurt, but at the same time, when they do get hurt, they're like, oh, thank God, like I need a break. It's like forced rest almost, you know what I mean? And I have a lot of people who are like emotionally and physically like ready to take a little bit of a break, but they're too scared to stop training or tell their coaches or parents that they don't want to.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's when I kind of realized I had lost my mind.
Yeah.
And then I did what I typically do, is I began reading. And I began reading about gymnastics. I think that's when you were also diagnosed with scoliosis too, right? About that time. And so then I'm blaming gymnastics and blaming me putting her in gymnastics. And I'm talking to the doctor about, did gymnastics cause this? And he actually said, which I don't know if he said it to make me feel better, but he actually said, because she's so limber, that's actually better in terms of her scoliosis getting better, because of how, her bones were, limber, right? Yeah. That he thinks it could be helpful that she is a gymnast. But I think all those things began to make me kind of reflect on what the heck we were doing. Her coaches were never a huge Chelsie fan. I'll say it that way. Can I say that?
You did.
You had one coach that loved you. Maybe two.
I had a couple.
He had a couple. Chelsea was never, because she wasn't the one jumping up and saying, "Coach, look at me, or let me do it again." Or Chelsea wasn't that gymnast. Chelsea was always at the end of the line and almost hiding behind something to not go, versus the other gymnasts that were like, "Oh, coach, 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 coach." That was not Chelsea. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that this speaks to probably one of the biggest points that comes up a lot in gymnastics that I think we're not having a real conversation about is this is definitely a fault of my own too. But I lived around people that were so hardcore, my coaches, my friends. And then I definitely got brainwashed. I was hanging out with coaches that were just push, push, push. And I was going to camps and learning from some of the higher up coaches that were push, push, push. And I was so blinded by everybody assuming that this is normal and we just do this in gymnastics. This is how it goes. You just train hard. Don't talk about your injuries, especially on the guy side. The guy side is way more stoic and way more don't speak about it. But it was like, don't talk about your injuries. Just keep going. If you get hurt, off to the side, we'll see you when you're better kind of thing. Like this weird fear-based dictatorship-based culture. And we all lived through it, especially in the last 10 years. And we're seeing the severe ramifications of what happened when people all just, high-fived each other and were yes to each other. Just like, yep, that's fine. That's fine. And nobody ever took their head up and said like, guys, is this okay? Like, are we okay with this? What we're doing to young kids? And I do think that there are coaches who do it right. They deserve credit and they're hardworking and they treat kids very, very well. But every once in a while when they speak up, everyone's like, nope. And they get blackballed. A lot of my friends on the medical side tried to do what I'm doing 10 years ago, but gymnastics was so not ready to change. They just got pushed out of congresses. They just got pushed out of the circles. Don't talk to me. Like, you're not allowed back anymore. Like, shh, don't say anything. And I think that all of us in gymnastics, because of what's happened, are in this position where we're all finally being like, oh my God, whoa, like this is bad. Like the nutrition information is horrible. The training hours need reconsideration. We need to talk to other professionals. A lot of my friends outside of the gymnastics world look at what I do with these gymnasts and they just shake their head. They're like, you guys are insane. You guys are nuts. You guys are absolutely nuts. No 12-year-old should have a back fracture. Right. I've 8-year-olds with OCD surgeries. And it's like, this is not okay. Like, overhaul. Like, you guys need to realize we screwed up. There's some things that are really good, but there's so many things that are so broken. We can't just assume it's going to get better. You have to start over, and it starts with a harsh conversation. And applause to you for being so self-aware during this time. And thankfully mine came later. It's like earlier now, but like we all have to have this moment of like, okay, pause. Yeah. If this takes 2 years to fix and we don't win some medals or we don't, do so well, we need to fix this because this is severely broken.
Yeah, it is. And I agree with you. Brainwashing is the best way to say it. I remember us sitting in the lobby of parents, and a parent, the coach came into the lobby, and the parent went so off on this coach about not working my daughter hard enough. And her daughter was beside her, and her daughter's crying, "Mom, stop, Mom, stop." And the mother is like losing it because neither of them worked hard enough, the coach nor the daughter, that night. And I just thought, ooh, I hope that's not me. But we lose it. It's like road rage, gym rage.
Absolutely. You get lost in it. And there's two things that I've been thinking a lot about that I think are important to note here. So one is, as a coach, similar to how you observe other parents, I wonder as a coach, if I'm treating behavior aside, if someone's like has neutral behavior, they're a good person, they're working hard in the gym. I wonder if I treat the least talented, lowest level athlete in my squad the same as I do my hardest, like highest talent, most gifted, working athlete. Because if you don't treat
at Chelsea's gym that way, definitely.
I definitely screwed that up as a younger athlete. I definitely, gravitated towards the more naturally talented and stuff. And this is behavior aside. If someone's being very sassy, they're disrespectful, it's completely at it. But pending their behavior is the same. As a coach, you need to really think about, do I treat all the athletes equally if they're working hard and they're a good person? Because if you don't, you need a serious moment of self-reflection, because that is a huge, huge problem. Just because someone has different goals or doesn't progress as fast, it doesn't mean you can treat them, differently in the gym. And the other thing I think about a lot, especially now as I'm getting a little bit older in my coaching career, is if something happened and, I couldn't go back to the gym or God forbid something serious happened, like an illness, and I couldn't do it, would I regret the way that I treated the athletes that I work with? Like, can I fall asleep at night every night knowing that I did the best I could? Or if something happens and I get sick and I never coach, are these athletes going to come back in 10 years and be like, man, Dave was a jerk. Like, Like
Yeah.
it was bad. Like I hated the way he treated me. He always demeaned me. He talked down to me. And I hear a lot of athletes now on their post-elite retirement, post-college retirement. Some are good. Some are great. Some have great coaches. But I hear a lot of people that are like, I got to a high level. I got my scholarship, but I hated every second of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we feel that way. I don't know. I say we. I do. What about you?
I think it's all, not to be like positive, but I think it's all.
You can be positive.
I think it's all.
Please do.
Yeah, because Dave and I will go there.
Hey, if you don't look at the dark things, you never find the light, right?
I think it's all a learning experience. I know for me, as the athlete, I was younger. I didn't know I had a voice. I thought this is just how things go. But I actually met up with one of my old teammates recently, and we both just started talking about the old times and how a lot of things weren't okay. And we didn't know it at that moment because we were in that toxic environment. But I think if you're able to take a step back and look at where you've come from, maybe you can learn from it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. And there's many good things that came out of my experiences, and there's many that come out of all these other athletes that I work with. I don't want to say it's all bad, but I think the way to look at it is it's like, it's not all broken. We just have an insane amount of work to do. I think that's the better way to frame the conversation.
That's a really good way to say it.
It's true.
Because I don't think it's like, start from scratch and fire everybody and burn it all down. And like for all of gymnastics as a sport, I think it's just about self-awareness and education about, we have to make sure that people are getting the most out of the sport, and that if they don't have high level goals, that as a coach, we're not judging them based on that.
Yeah. And knowledge. I mean, we talked about it when we interviewed you on our podcast. Knowledge. We need to share information, honest information. We'll jump to, Chelsea's had other injuries, but I remember after another one of her injuries, I went and got a book that talked about women in soccer and their injuries.
Yep.
And I loved it. It was and it also talked about just how, when girls go through puberty, how their bodies are different, and that we have to be careful about injuries during that time.
Sure.
I went and bought two. I bought two books, and I gave one to Chelsea's coach because I was, such a fanatic at that point about all the things that were happening with Chelsie and the injuries and other girls, that if I could just give the coach information so that he could change how he's training the girls.
Yep.
And I tried to give it to other parents, because at that point I wanted everybody to know kind of what we're going through. It doesn't have to be that way.
Yep.
But nobody wanted to hear it at that point. I mean, because at that point, again, Chelsie had two more injuries. Well, she's had a lot more injuries, but two more surgeries at that point. And it was like, we can't do this. But we, at some point, I guess we could have walked away, but we didn't.
At that point, you're
committed.
Yeah, you're already in it.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying too about, I mean, from my outside point, hearing your story for the first time, like what you're doing, getting books and trying to teach people is incredible, because that's something I think a lot of people don't take upon themselves to do. But the other piece that I think has to come with this is what you talked about with trying to get more information is I think people have to be okay with a little bit of faith for the next few years of like, nobody wants to jump off the cliff right now because they're worried about the ramifications. They're worried about the team not doing so well. They're worried about doing a different strength program and having it not work out. They're worried about changing, going against the grain of what's always been taught and having it not work out. It's probably not going to. It's probably not going to be perfect the first time you change the way you approach your gym and the way you approach your training and your coaching and stuff like that. Like I can't tell readers or listeners how many times I had this great idea and I tried it and it completely blew up and it didn't work at all. Or my boss, Eva, was just like, yeah, that's not going to work. But we learn from that and you move a step forward. It took us 5 years to get to where we are now, which was like from a very kind of broken, toxic culture to where we are now. But there were so many moments of like, we'll try it, didn't work, screw up, repeat. We'll try it, didn't work, screw up, repeat. Like people have to be okay being like, if it doesn't work out for a year or so, it's fine. At least we're doing something different, because really what we're doing now is just not really working out for long-term health and performance.
Right. Right. I mean, and as a parent, I did things like I became like president of the Parents Association to try to protect Chelsie, because at that point, again, once she had the injuries, I became her biggest protector.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
just I knew that I had to be involved enough so that I was protecting her, because I did such a poor job in my mind at these early stages, that I tried to do things to make sure that she was going to be safe.
Mm.
I remember at one point too, we were giving the coach a gift, right? So we'd get all the money together to give the coach a gift. And I was one that when I wouldn't go to the doctors that the coach recommended, right? Because the coach always had the doctors that they would recommend the gymnast go to,
Yep.
which I just didn't believe in that, because I wanted a neutral body to decide about her injuries, and not a gymnast doctor, but a doctor who had nothing to do with gymnastics and was really treating her for her injury. And I remember he said, her issue is that it's overuse. Her injuries are overuse. There's too much of doing the same thing over and over again. And I remember the parents wanted to give the coach a gift, right? So we all gave money. And the gift that they were giving the coach was an X-ray machine, so that the coach could have. When I say an X-ray, it's the thing that you put the X-ray on and you can see the injury.
Yeah.
So that the coach could tell them, the gymnast, whether that was injured enough for them to,
And he wasn't a doctor.
He was a coach. But that's when we talk about kind of this wacky world that we're in.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's what the gift was. And so they were supposed to go get x-rays wherever they got x-rays and bring them back to the coach to look at them. And I just thought, yeah, we have reached a place that we do not need to be.
Houston, we have a problem.
But because at that point too, right? Because he was coaching the upper level gymnast. It was really about getting your daughter into a great college at that point.
Yeah. I'd like you to continue with the story now, because I think this is where it's going, but like the next chapter of this kind of post self-awareness realization, and then what happened next.
Yeah, because at that point you committed all these years, all this time, and all these injuries. And I remember Chelsie and I sitting at this table actually, and she had just come back from surgery. This was the Achilles tear, or was it the hand, the wrist?
Oh, I don't remember.
I don't remember which one it was.
When did those happen? What age were you when those happened?
So my first major injury was my sophomore year in high school, if I'm remembering correctly. And it was overuse injury. I tore cartilage in my wrist.
Mm-hmm.
And what I vividly remember about that is I had the surgery one day, and then 2 days later, I had a recruiting trip out in Utah that I went on.
I remember this one. Okay, so I wasn't quite ready yet, Dave. Let's just say I thought I was
better. I'm better than this. I look good right now, though.
So that was my first major injury. So at that point, I was on the right track to get that full scholarship. And then I competed a year, and then that following summer, I ended up tearing my Achilles tendon.
Your senior year?
Yes. So then at that point, I thought I was done with gymnastics, because colleges stopped caring and nobody really wanted anything to do with me at that point.
Yeah.
How did you do it, if you don't mind me asking?
I was actually at Woodward. And for us, Woodward was like extreme gymnastics. We were training from morning all the way till night. So my coach actually was coaching a clinic at that time, and we were tumbling up onto a resi pit. So it was pretty high, and I was just doing a round off backhand handspring layup onto the resi. And I thought I had run into the resi because I heard something.
Yeah.
I also felt something.
Yeah.
I didn't realize I did it until I hopped off of the resi.
Yeah.
And then I just crumbled, and that was it. And
Wow.
at the time, that was before Achilles injuries were like major. So no one really knew what was happening or the timeline for things, because it was pretty new. It was back in 2009 or something like that.
Yeah. And the surgery on your hand, and I think I've heard you reference like this time when you saw her wake up in the hospital. Was that the surgery you're talking about?
Yes, it was. This
That was
little bitty body in a big bed.
yeah.
And it was funny because the surgery was supposed to take, I don't know, an hour maybe. It wasn't supposed to take long at all. And I remember my husband and I were in the waiting room waiting for the doctor to finish. And it's the same doctor who said, overuse, overuse, overuse. He was not a fan of gymnastics by any stretch.
I could tell.
Yeah, he was not. Yeah. And the gym was not happy that I was taking her to this doctor either, because he would, want him to get back. But we were waiting in the waiting room for an hour. And then another hour went by. So now we're 2 hours for this surgery that's only supposed to take an hour. And he comes out and he's got his iPad. And he said, well, I had to cut a little bit more than I thought I'd have to cut. But I really want it to be where she can use it again. And then he goes through this iPad and he starts showing you these pictures of the damage and then what he did. And I'm physically ill at this point, physically ill, that this is my daughter's hand, that she needs to do all the things she needs to do with it. And we're, worried about when she's going to get back into the gym. And it was just that realization. And then when, of course, when it came time for her recovery, you go in that room and she's got this contraption of this, wrapped up arm, and you're thinking, what the heck are we doing?
Yeah. And there's two things here that come up. So I'm going to start with the one that I know is least popular, but like, there's definitely a lot of work that has to happen on the medical side of them better understanding gymnastics. There's a lot of doctors, PTs, ATs that I think are just kind of like fudging it a little bit. They're trying to work with gyms, but they really don't understand the sport. And so I do want to say first that there's a lot of work to be done on the medical side for this, like proper diagnosis, proper rehab, proper return to sport protocols. But that being said, something that makes me physically ill that I deal with a lot is people who I feel like are just really blatantly ignoring medical advice for young athletes who have these injuries that start young, like Sever's disease, back stress reaction, stress fractures, OCD, elbows. And I definitely did this. I did this wrong when I wasn't a PT. I just kind of like assumed that pain was pain, that you just live with it. And that like, that's how I operated as a young gymnast. That's what I like, oh, we'll just deal with it. And like, whatever, we'll get through. And you were kind of pushing kids back too soon. I think something that is in the culture that's very, very dangerous and needs to stop is like coaches dabbling too much on the medical side and vice versa. I think medical providers need to do a much better job about being educated about the sport, because a lot of this stuff that's coming is, someone gets a Sever's disease diagnosis. They say, okay, you need 3 weeks of no impact and 2 weeks return to sport. And the coach goes, we have a meet in a few weeks, like tumble track for a week, then you're back in there. Like don't stop until absolutely like miserable pain. It's like, that is crazy. I've had people tell me that the MRIs, like the best MRIs we have available, are wrong, and at the back, like it's not right. It's in their head. The back MRI is wrong. They shouldn't listen to it. Like, don't wear the brace. Take the brace off. Get back to the gym earlier. Do the timelines. And like this is not. I'm not going to say it's one person, one coach. I hear it all over the world, everywhere I go. And this is like, guys, this is disgusting. If you're listening to this and you have a guilty on either side of this, like science is science, and there's a real reason why we got to wait with young kids.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's what you said. We didn't know. And, we did what we could, but we didn't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully admit it now. I can say that I have hurt kids because I wasn't educated enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, that's why when we do our podcast, I share kind of our experience, because I mean, we have, the gymnastics mom on there on purpose, because there was so much that I didn't know. And I didn't ask the right questions to the right people. But I also think, to your point, we've learned, this whole thing, we're going through this evolution now of knowledge and wanting to know that, if we can contribute to help that happen, that's what we want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd like to finish the end of your story and your career in gymnastics. Then we can wrap things up with like advice and things like that. But what happened for you after the Achilles tear and like moving forward there?
So my Achilles tear took about, I'd say like a solid 8 months to come back from.
Like to hear that. That's good.
So
But during that time too, you're trying to decide whether you're gonna do gymnastics again, right?
right, because I tore my Achilles going into my senior
Yes,
year.
it was junior. Yeah, exactly. It was that summer of your senior year.
Yeah. So I still hadn't committed anywhere yet.
Gotcha.
But at that point, that's where I really learned about Division 1 or Division 2 and Division 3, because it was very common in my gym for everyone to go full scholarship Division 1. So I wasn't aware that you don't have to go Division 1. And I think that's really what saved me. And looking back on it now, I don't think I'm a Division 1 athlete. I don't think I would have been happy, or even I don't think I would have succeeded in gymnastics at a Division 1 level. And I think on the podcast, that's what I try and share with everyone, that there are other schools besides the LSUs, the UCLAs, the Alabamas, and you can still have a successful gymnastics career in Division 2 or Division 3, or even a lower level Division 1 program. So yeah, I ended up going Division 2, and I enjoyed my college career. I think that's really the time where I loved gymnastics the most, because I was doing it on my own time. I was coming back from this major injury, and I was really just, again, doing gymnastics for myself.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it was after that last injury when you had the chance to decide whether you continued or didn't, that you found the love of gymnastics.
And actually, I'm going to give Mom a shout out here, because you've been so hard on yourself.
I think you are an amazing mom from hearing your story.
Oh, thank you all.
So I actually was done. I wanted to quit. I didn't want to go to practice anymore, not even through rehab. I just wanted to be done. But Mom told me, don't make any major decisions until you're fully healed.
Great advice.
So I kept going to the gym. I did conditioning on the side. And it was hard to watch everyone continue to get better as I was stuck in this boot. And it was a really tough injury to come back from. But Mom helped me make that decision to keep going for it. Just because other people are saying your gymnastics career is over, just don't come anymore. Mom was really my cheerleader.
Oh, that was me, Dave.
This is hilarious. So my mom's going to listen to this podcast. My mom and I talk on FaceTime. She always comes, she goes, "I'm still your mother. I'm still your mother." My mom, she can be like, "That's me. That's me. I did that." You deserve the credit, man. Parenting's freaking hard from what I see.
She had a really, really good doctor. Because of course I only got the best doctors for her too, right? You know, we go to that nth degree. And he recommended that she do ballet lessons to recover.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that.
In addition to regular rehab and physical therapy, he also recommended ballet. So really my senior year, it was about getting healthy in the best shape for me and my gymnastics career post club. At that point, I think Mom and I both were just like, who cares what outside people are saying? Like, we're going to do what we need to do to get to the place that we want to be.
Right.
That is such a consistent message that I've heard from so many amazing people, whether they're former Olympians, whether they're great coaches, whether they're, you know, just the average medical provider who's trying to help. And this goes back to what we talked about with coaching and why these things probably start in the first place, is like, the best people that I see have a chance in gymnastics are able to really outline their morals and their values and why they're in gymnastics, and clearly know those things, and then not listen to all the noise. They don't listen to the noise of other coaches or people pressuring them. They're saying, I'm doing the best that I can with the best intent every single day. And it's me versus me, not judgment of others, not fear of judgment of others, or what they're going to say or what they're going to do. And I think, again, social media is brutal right now with how popular it is. But, and this is my piece of advice. And then if you guys want, I really want to hear what you think for coaches and for parents, for young athletes, that you have to literally sit with yourself for a long time. Like, here are all the things that I've been screwing up. Here's how I'm going to fix them. And once I get through this, here's how I'm going to operate every day based on my values, my morals. And I'm going to make decisions based on these, not based on what this gym is doing, not based on what Facebook says, not based on what the college coach is telling me to do. And those are the people that I find have a really happy career coaching or being in gymnastics, but they're also the people that I think make it long-term.
It's so true. It's so true. Once we made that turn where it was about us, everything, even her competing in college and whether she made team or not, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
It just, when she fell off the beam or if she had a successful beam routine, it didn't matter. We were there with each other, and it was the sport that she had loved, that she was doing it her way. Made all the difference in the world.
It goes back to that too, like right when it's all said and done and the dust settles, and even if you go Division I, it's big lights, flashing cameras, like the dust is going to settle and all you're going to have is your friends and your family. So when you get back to there, if you can't sleep at night with the decisions you're making, you got to have a hard conversation with yourself, because and all said and done, it's going to move on. We're going to go somewhere. And I think a lot of coaches right now are unfortunately going through these moments of regret where they're like, wow, I can't believe I allowed myself to do that for so long. And I'm one of them too. I had a harsh moment like 4 or 5 years ago and I was like, I can't believe I've been allowing myself to act this way for 4 or 5 years. But so what do you think from the parent perspective? What would you advise to, I mean, there's gonna be a lot of parents who listen to this. And so I want to hear what you think you would recommend to these young parents.
I think what you've always said, look in the mirror, right? Separate yourself from your child's love, right? Yep. And it's two different things. What you want and what you want for her is completely different from what she wants from herself. And when she's young, obviously you don't think she knows, right? She doesn't know what's good for her. But actually they do. They do know. Yep. And I also would say you are your daughter's or your son's advocate.
Totally.
And I'm just going to say that one again, right? You are your daughter or your son's advocate, no matter what anybody says. And you know your child. You know what they're good at. You know what they're not good at. You know what they're saying, even if they're not saying it. And believe that and listen to that. Also, you can forgive yourself.
That's big. Yeah. What about you, Chelsie? Any backwards advice to parents listening?
I would say don't be so hard on yourself. I think we're only able to look at this the way that we look at it now because we've been through the hard times. So don't be so hard on yourself. But advice that I would share with gymnasts, and it's something that I struggled with definitely in my gymnastics career, is don't compare yourself to others. Especially, again, with this social media, the way that it is today, it's really easy for you to compare yourself to other gymnasts. But just stay in your lane. You can only control your gymnastics career. So don't worry about what other people are saying or what other people are doing.
Yep. And then we'll end on this one because I definitely do not want to seem like we're bashing coaches because I'm one of them. But what would you guys both recommend for coaches out there that are listening and are maybe having some very aha moments throughout this conversation?
That's a tough one. That's a tough one. Chelsea's coaches believed that if you feared the skill more than you feared them, that was not a good thing. So they wanted the girls to fear the coach more than they feared the skill. Now, is that good or bad? I don't know. know.
My buddy Nick says that fear is a good motivator, that fear does work in the short term, but it's toxic and corrosive in the long term. It's not how you build, because what we're really trying to do here, and this is my opinion, this is not, I guess, standard, but what we're trying to do here is we're trying to build crazy thing about gymnastics is that it builds such a unique relationship with fear. There's no other sport that is fear driven on every turn that you can really get hurt. You can really have something go wrong. So I think one of the big things that we're trying to do is to teach kids to develop self-strategies to manage their fear and use graded exposure to get through fearful things, because those are the skills that really transfer over the most in life, along with hard work and dedication and perseverance and having a community. I think the relationship with fear is really important, because that's universal for everybody. Fear and insecurity drives a lot of what people do. But I think that if you're trying to use the proper dosage of fear and how to cope with that with healthy mechanisms, that's the gift that gymnastics gives, and it's pretty incredible. If you are turning this into a little bit of an ego inflation, and now fear is what you're instilling in people because you want them to, like, you know, you're entitled to something, or your ego is saying like, well, I'm such a great coach, or I'm such a good parent, and blah, blah, blah. They have to do it because it's fear of what you're going to do. That's a very unhealthy, toxic relationship with fear, and you're ruining why someone's in the sport in the first place.
Right, right, right. And so the advice to your original question is the ego too. I think this whole power thing, you're deciding, you know, people's lives.
Yeah.
You know, you're deciding, and you have them 20 hours a week, right? You have the girls 20 hours a week, you have their parents, you know, and you're making decisions that affect people's lives.
Yeah.
And so just recognize that as you're making those decisions.
Yeah, that's huge. And it's a really good thing to end on. One of my friends, Seth Oberst, is a very high level stress researcher in people and in kids. And we're going to dive into this a lot, but I'll keep it short. But you have, as a coach, not just gymnastics, and as a parent, you have an incredible opportunity to take the fork in the road. You can either positively influence the athlete significantly with like good training and hard work, and you can be tough love, and that's okay. And you can build that, and that can shoot somebody on a really successful path of the things that they can do with the skill set that gymnastics gives them, but also performance wise, what they can accomplish at a world level or a college level, whatever. Or it can go the other way, you know, based on the choices you make every single day, those 1% choices you make every day, whether you're going to snap and yell at a kid, or whether you're going to make them punish with conditioning, or you're going to, you know, do something that's undermining them as a person. Those things slide an athlete downhill, and a young child is very, very vulnerable to toxic stress. And I wish that people understood the research on what like these kind of environments and stress does to a kid's brain and long-term potential. It's very, very scary when it starts to talk about the negative aspects of depression and anxiety and, you know, crazy stuff like suicide and stuff like that. But on the positive side, it's very protective. If you can be a good example, have good morals, you can really launch somebody into a positive self-confidence and positive work ethic and stuff. But the choice lies in everyone's hands every time they talk to an athlete about sensitive issues, or every time they make a decision about how they're going to handle the practice.
Right. And it's a balance. And it's what you've always said too. It's not something that you have to learn it. You have to
Yep.
study it. You have to understand this, you know, what you're saying and the impact that it has.
Yep. And you and I both are big avid book readers, but some of these things are only taught through experience.
Yeah, exactly.
And just to snowball off that, I think it's so important to really understand each of the athletes' personalities.
Totally.
For one athlete that may thrive under pressure and intense training, for another athlete that might not be the same approach that works for them. So I think that's just one step in the right direction, because as we said earlier, it's really kind of how a coach decides to coach their athletes. It can either go one way or the other. And I think, speaking from experience, a lot of the things that I did experience in clubs, I'll never forget in a bad way, but also in a positive way. I did have a lot of great experiences. So again, I think it's just learning what works best for each athlete.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another common theme I've heard from a lot of the higher level gymnasts that have come on. I don't know if you guys heard the episode with John Horton, but he said that he loved it when his coach got in his face. I mean, he loved like the intensity. He loved the yelling. He loved the no, do it now, push it, stir mentality. He's like, I loved it. I thrived off it. But he also, his coach, Tom, understood other athletes weren't like that. And that's what makes Tom such a good coach. And Sam Pezic said that as well, that her coach understood like the push-pull days, and he was able to read her really, really well. And so that's like it's called emotional intelligence in the psychology world. It's like very important to be present with the athletes and paying attention and adapting your style back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Well, I appreciate your time, and I want to end it with this because it's a Friday night for both of us here. So first is anything that you guys want to ask me on you're not going to offend anybody on my podcast, so you can ask in a non-protected version, outside your own home.
I don't have anything to ask. I just need for you to know how thankful we are that that you're sharing your voice, and that you're sharing your truth, because that allows us to share our truth. And I think if we have enough proofs out there, maybe we can all make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really do appreciate that a lot. And I think the reason I have become more vocal in the last few years is most people assume that it's because I'm kind of out to get people, and that's really not my case at all. But people may not know unless they live close to me, but I've actually gone through some pretty tough times and some coaching and personally with the lack of decision, moral compass that I had. I've lived through some pretty brutal emotional times because I made the wrong decisions and because I wasn't willing to have that hard conversation with myself. And so I think that was a catalyst for me wanting to try to improve my own life and my coaching and stuff like that. But also, I don't want people to make the same mistakes that I did and live in a regretful way. Because I had a period of time where I was very regretful for the things that I did or did not do coaching wise. And so, yeah, I'm just trying to open up the conversation. And I'm very lucky that people think I have a valid opinion. Let's be real. I'm super surprised every time somebody signs up for something or every time somebody wants me to speak. Still, like, I can't believe people think some nerd from Boston believes that it's worth listening to. So I'm grateful for people.
Well, we're glad that you've shared your thoughts on our podcast. And we've said this, we're having you every year, so just know that.
Totally down.
I think you could come up with something to say every year too, Dave. I think you could come up with something to say every single year, actually.
Trust me, it gets weird up top in here, man. There's some really nerdy stuff floating around there. So whatever you want to hear. Well, maybe one time in traveling, we'll meet up and we'll do a live episode.
Oh, we would love that.
That's a great idea.
Did you make it to nationals last year?
Not last year. I went 2 years ago, and I did just regional congresses locally after that. But I've taken a break from traveling and speaking. I did a lot of it like 3 or 4 years ago, and I just need to be coaching more. I need to be home for the clinic. It's really busy, but also I just got a little burnt out on the travel schedule. So I'm taking a break, but I believe next spring, I'm probably going to do like a pretty aggressive traveling schedule again sometime soon. So that will come down the road. We'll make sure where are you guys located? I don't even know.
Maryland.
Oh, nice. My best friend and teammates from Maryland.
Oh, okay.
Well, and you're in Boston, is that right?
Yeah. I'm going to.
We're right away from each other.
Yeah, I know, right? That's we can make it happen. I love that area. I love that area.
Come down and see us. Chelsea's in DC. I'm in Maryland. But all three of us are on the Amtrak train route, so we can do that.
Great. Another one of my best friends lives in DC as well, so we'll have to make it work.
Let us know when you're in town.
That's it. Well, we'll wrap it up with that. So where can people find you and plug everything that's good about the Routine Podcast? Because I love listening to it.
Thank you. So our website is called theroutinepodcast.com. Our Twitter, which I think we have fun on Twitter, is at Routine Podcast. And we're always looking for voicemails for our podcast, which is also our website.
Right.
That's something very unique about you guys.
Yeah. Well, then, the name of the podcast, as you know, is the Routine Podcast, Gymnastics Conversations. And so it's key that we have conversations. And to do that, we encourage people to leave voicemails.
Yeah, that's great.
To do that, this is the plug I put on every show. To do that, you go to the top navigation. You'll see something that says be a part of the conversation. You click that. You scroll to the bottom of the page. You'll see a microphone. You click the microphone and you leave us a voicemail message.
You guys know that
That's my show.
I'm going to leave you guys like prank calls in the middle of the night now.
That would be great. Any call would be good.
That's great. All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for your time. I think this was an amazing conversation, and I'm very grateful that you guys came out and chatted about it.
Thank you, Dave.
You for having us.
Thanks for asking for us to talk to you. We've had a
No
great
problem.
time.
Absolutely. We'll get it chopped up and put out in a few weeks, you guys.
All right. Have a good one.
See ya.
Bye.
Hey, my computer didn't die that time.
Dave, that was so
Um,
much fun.
that was awesome. Yeah, you guys. I think you guys undervalue your dual perspective on things outside of just talking about gymnastics gossip.
We try not to go like that deep.
Yeah, we really try not to. We see Chelsea's coaches every now and then. It's like, oh. So when you're managing it, just keep that in mind. If you think that we've said something that's gonna offend her gym, just think about it.
Yeah.
So I used to care, and now I don't. Because if it pisses you off, it was a problem, and you should probably deal with it.
Yeah,
it's true.
So I don't know if you guys, and the recording's off now, so you're not going to get into this, but I've had a few episodes where, so Tasia Persevich, did you listen to her episode at all? She was a level 10, tried to go elite, and then went to UNH and had like horrific body image and nutrition problems and eating disorders because her coaches weighed and body fat tested her like on a weekly basis when she was like 11.
No. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So she had like, and she's a very good friend of mine. So she did that, went through UNH, and then now she's literally competing right now in the CrossFit Games with Rich Froning, who's like the best team. She won the CrossFit Games last year with Rich. And she went into CrossFit with this like horrific body image problem and eating disorders. And CrossFit has helped her build her way out of it. But she came on the podcast and looked back at all of the horrible things that happened to her. And she like literally just roasted everybody. And I was like, if this hurts your feelings, good, because you're not going to change what's really hurt your feelings like that. It takes uncomfortable conversations and uncomfortable moments with yourself. If you get mad and defensive, then maybe you don't belong here.
Yeah. And, Chelsea's coach was tough. I mean, he was real tough. Yeah. And you know, in hindsight, I should have like kicked his ass.
Yeah. That's awesome.
In hindsight, you know, it was just not good. It really wasn't. I mean, and, you know, there's a lot that the sport did for her and a lot that gym did for her, especially when it came to when she went to college and some of the foundational stuff that he had taught. But it was not the gym for her to go to in hindsight.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I also I try my best not to talk about who I work with and like all this, because it's part of it's HIPAA violation, but also part of it's just like, you know, confidentiality and like they're friends of mine. But Mihai's gym, Brushins, is 10 minutes away from my clinic, and I treat the entire team. So I work with all the athletes, and I've done work with Australia, and he's the national team coordinator. So I know exactly what people are going through with this hardcore stuff, but also I'm very good friends and consult with Alabama, Utah, UCLA, like all those big schools I have interactions with and I work with, and they see what comes in from these high level clubs. So like, I know all too well about the reality of what's going on. And you guys have probably seen me trend more somber in the last year because I'm just, pardon my French, I'm fucking tired of dealing with it. I really am. Like it's so bad. It's like, I feel so bad. And like when I was talking on your guys' show, I was like, I'm ready to quit, because I'll give a protocol and I'll give him back and he'll just ignore it. He'll just completely ignore the protocol, or other people will just come in with multiple surgeries, multiple issues. I'm like, what are you, like, you are a shitty human. What are you doing? And like, it's so disgusting to see sometimes.
Yeah. And what we talked about is just the training and the gymnastics. We're not talking about the politics.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right? Yeah. The politics that go on where, you know, where Chelsie didn't get the Leo that everybody else got. You know, there's just stuff like that you're going through, that they mentally are messing with your child's mind.
Yeah.
That you're just like, what are you doing? And what am I letting you do? That's the thing.
Yeah. It's like gossip, like this weird gossip girl, kind of like cloak and dagger. You got to know the person and privileges. And like, I'm so happy that that's being exposed right now, because that is the root of all evil in our sport, is the you know who you know. And like what really got me was 2 years ago when I went to, I think it might have been nationals here in Boston or there, but I went to, you know, early in my career, I was trying to like impress all the people, and Mihai and Blair and everybody else. And I was trying to know, and they didn't really give a shit about what I was doing. They were like, oh, just fix this person and get them back when you're done. And then I went to the bar after one of the big meets, and I just looked around, and all these coaches were like gossiping and complaining about the meets, and like had to know this person. Oh my God, it's her. It was like stardom and fandom. They loved it. They loved this attention and talk crap while they're drunk. And I was like, what are you doing here? So now I don't do it anymore. I don't hang out with any of those people anymore.
It's absolutely true. And we've been out of it for a while. I don't know if it's changed or not. I hope it has.
slowly.
Yeah, but it was bad. It was bad news.
But and as I said in the podcast, I don't know if you know Brianna Guy. She went to Auburn.
Yeah, I listened to her episode with you guys. Yep.
Yeah, so she was at my gym, and whenever we interviewed her for that episode, that was when I really had the clarity when we were discussing like what we went through was not okay. And that was the first time that I talked to a former teammate of mine about what we actually experienced. Because I thought it was A, in my head of what I was experiencing, and B, this is gymnastics. This is what you go through.
And definitely the trend of Achilles tears and stuff like that too. Like, even though you guys didn't know, like that is 1000% the product of not treating a young athlete going through puberty well from like 11 to 14. Like the ramifications of that come later in college are because your Achilles tendon has taken such a beating when you were younger and not really, your severs that we all had severs probably at one point that became an Achilles tendinopathy, and we just shook it off and just keep going, or like, land short in a vault and pinch your ankles real hard. Like that stuff is stressing the Achilles real bad. And so a lot of people I've worked with like that have like young 14, 15-year-old Achilles tears, like, oh, it's just like the floor, it's their technique. It's like, nope, we're just treating kids like that when they're in puberty.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing, right? We didn't know. We didn't know. But for you, we're letting people know.
Yeah. It's one thing to not know. It's one thing to not know. It's another thing to know and look the other way, which is what's happening.
Yeah. Well, hopefully not. Hopefully people start listening. Hopefully.
It's getting better. It's getting better. It is.
It's like concussions, like in football,
Definitely.
Right?
Exactly.
I think when parents know, right, then parents aren't going to let their kids play football.
Totally.
Mothers are not going to let their kids do gymnastics 20 hours a week. Because what I know now, if I would have known then, there's no way in this earth I would have done it. No way. So,
all right. Well, I hope you
Dave.
have a wonderful weekend. Thank you guys so much. And I'll make sure what's the best way to reach out to you guys? Twitter or email is fine?
If you want to like publicize stuff, Twitter is great, but like personal back and forth, email is good.
Cool. All right. Yeah, I'll let you know and I'll send you guys all the links.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.